So the Artur Beterbiev knockout streak continues, now at 17, after he dispatches of Marcus Browne in the 9th round to defend his unified WBC and IBF light heavyweight titles. I predicted that this fight would end in the 10th. It didn't. We were 1 round off. It ended in the 9th. But I do feel like this fight fell into the pattern I outlined it would in the pre-fight video. The opening bell is gone, and Marcus Browne is moving around the ring with a good deal of fluidity, as we expect, because he is a very athletic fighter, and opting to just use the jab. On occasions, he would also hook and move off of the hook as well, rather than targeting the head of Beterbiev. I feel like he was just using the hook to control the lead glove of Beterbiev and use it as, of course, a control, but leverage to move off as well. So there was a good deal of movement, and he was making use of that kind of set menu 1-2, I want to call it, where he'd use the right jab and the left hand, and it works early on, especially when you have someone who's athletic and fluid and fast, as Marcus Browne. It was catching Artur Beterbiev off guard, especially to the midsection, because Artur Beterbiev is quite a stationary fighter at times. He's not the most mobile, and of course the midsection of the body is always a bigger target, so it moves less and it's bigger. And so if you're a fighter like Artur Beterbiev, who doesn't move that much, the body is going to be a prime target. However, Beterbiev, I feel like the commentators got it pretty spot on, at least one of them, because he said that Beterbiev's no stranger to being outboxed and kind of outskilled on the surface. He's no stranger to it. And just because he is maybe losing around, he doesn't necessarily lose control of a fight. And I feel like that's a luxury that a lot of the time is afforded to fighters like Beterbiev, because they have that one-punch knockout power, but there's a tenacity about them as well. Artur Beterbiev, he's no stranger to kind of turning the tables on a fighter when he has to, by just applying more pressure, hitting them where they need to, wherever he can. And that's what we'll see in this fight as well. There was a clash of heads in the 4th round, because what Marcus Browne was doing, he was utilizing a tactic which is a little frowned upon, I want to say, where he would usually use his right hook and then he'd smother. So he'd use the right hook and he'd kind of swing himself into Beterbiev and hold. Now, it wasn't excessive, but it's something that, as I say, many people frown upon, because it's intelligent. You can understand the thought process behind it, because you hit your opponent, you attack your opponent, and then you smother them and hold so they can't get their offense off. If you look at the ethos of boxing, hit and don't get hit, it fits, but it is kind of spoiling tactics a little bit. And he did that, and it seemed they got into a bit of a wrestling match, and the heads clashed, and the blood streaming from Beterbiev's head, because he was cut on the forehead, kind of just between the eyebrows. That cut was just pouring blood like a tap. It was quite surreal at first, because you can see on the slow-mo the gash open and it squirts blood out, and Beterbiev's is covered. Marcus Browne was also cut, but I think his cut was a lot smaller and on the right eye, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was on the right eye. And Beterbiev kind of froze for a second after the referee called break, and Beterbiev looked like he was stunned, like he was shocked. And I imagine seeing that amount of your own blood is rather shocking, but it was like, oh, could Beterbiev maybe come undone here? But the opposite, actually. It clearly lit a fire underneath him, and this guy, he put his foot down and really upped the pressure on Browne, who I think it's fair to say had maybe like 3 of the first 4 rounds. That's what I probably had him. Definitely the first 2. The 3rd and the 4th, I can't really remember that well, but Beterbiev was starting to get into the fight. But from then, he was really putting his foot down, as I say. And there was a knockdown in round 7. And at this point, the knockdown in round 7 kind of resembled the knockdown in round 9. They're both very similar, and where Marcus Browne was up against the ropes, really a stationary target. He kind of just had his hands up not really very proactive, just trying to absorb the punches as best as he could. And Beterbiev, I feel he displayed here an ability that not many people give him credit for, and that is he modifies his power, he varies his power to set up bigger shots. And now this is something that I feel goes under the radar of Beterbiev, because he's a fighter that is kind of renowned for his punching power, and so it's easy to think and get kind of misconstrue what he's doing by thinking, okay, he's this massive power puncher, that means every single shot is hard. Well, I think that's selling Beterbiev a little bit short, because clearly he'll sacrifice power for speed up close, and he'll use uppercuts and body shots to open shots up elsewhere, it's a very underrated skill, and it's something that's really, I think the value of it is underrated in boxing. Because what are you doing? You're basically using shots not to damage your opponent, but to control them, manipulate where their guard is, manipulate their positioning, and then you set up the bigger shot. That's boxing. That is high level boxing. And so that's what he was doing to Marcus Browne. And sometimes he'd set up hard shots to the head using softer shots to the body, or vice versa, and he'd go for hard shots to the body. And it was on the inside and mid-range, it was pretty much just all Artur Beterbiev. Though Marcus Browne throughout the fight, he was kind of sprinkling in some body shots that were sneaking in, but they didn't really have much of an effect. And that was Marcus Browne's biggest issue in this fight, was he was boxing well and boxing competently, but without intimidating Artur Beterbiev. He was frustrating him, yes, but he wasn't stamping his authority on the fight, which is something that is absolutely essential in pretty much every fight, but especially against a fighter like Beterbiev, who, if he feels he's in a sticky situation, he'll just say, look, you know what? I'm going to have to put my foot down. I've got the power to knock this guy out. I know I do. I just have to land on him. So Marcus Browne he just didn't put enough, he didn't stick it on Artur Beterbiev enough from the opening bell. And look, it's easy to say that because that's a very simplistic view, but excuse me, that's the truth. That's just what happened. Marcus Browne also, I feel like the weaknesses or the shortcomings of Marcus Browne, which I outlined in the pre-fight video, about how he has this reliance on the jab. And now look, conventional wisdom tells you to rely on the jab. I've already debunked that myself. The jab requires a bit more of an intelligent thought process behind it. And Marcus Browne, what you'd see is as they got into engagements, he would pretty much rely exclusively on the right jab, a lot of the time at the same tempo as well. And so if you have the same weapon going to the same destination, coming from the same look, let's say, of your stance, and the same tempo as well, hope I didn't say tempo twice, but those main things, if those are all the same or very similar, it makes it easy for your opponent to counter. And you start to see that later on in the fight when Beterbiev, he'd be advancing towards Marcus Browne. Marcus Browne goes for the jab at the same, going to the same part of Beterbiev's body, usually to the head, at the same tempo, at the same pace, and Beterbiev would start to counter it. And so this is what I was outlining. Marcus Browne, he doesn't really do that much at long range. When you take away the movement's good, but that's only one part of it. If you take it away, Marcus Browne doesn't really do much. And this is kind of highlighted at the most when Marcus Browne was in the corner, because Beterbiev, he cuts off the ring fairly well and he applies that pressure, not necessarily quick, but he's imposing, and he gets into some very aggressive positions. And he backs Marcus Browne up against the ropes, especially in corners sometimes. And Marcus Browne just didn't really do anything because he doesn't really know what to do. He's so used to having space to move around and use the jab. As soon as you take that space away, he's only got that basic jab. And it didn't really pay off for him. If anything, it led partially to his demise. And now, it didn't really take much for Beterbiev to get to Marcus Browne, in the fact that the damage that Marcus Browne accumulated, and it's testament to not only Beterbiev's power but the consistency of the shots he was landing, because every round he would land one or two shots and it'd really take it out of Marcus Browne, to the point where Marcus Browne, I think it was in round 7, round 7 where he got knocked down, but even before that in round 6, I believe he was really starting to look gassed, Marcus Browne, and kind of quite dejected. And if you look at the knockdown in round 9, look at Browne's expression. He's looking at the ref, and he's just he's lucid. He's cognizant of what's going on. He's still attached to his senses, but he's looking at the ref. He's like, ref, just count slower, please. Like, I will get up, just count slower. Marcus Browne, it's like you could tell that he wasn't that badly hurt where he was out of it, but he was just beaten to a pulp, and it just knocked the spirit out of him. That being said, Marcus Browne, yeah, he sat the count out, so it is a knockout, but, you know, he tried. He fought one of the best performances of his career, in my opinion, but it just goes to show that there are still some levels that he has to kind of level up to if he's going to hang in there with the top dogs at light heavyweight. So Marcus Browne, I feel like he can come again, but he's going to need to kind of go on a bit of a journey to take his skill set to the next level. He's clearly got the physical ability. Maybe the chin's lacking, but look, many fighters have had subpar chin, subpar punch resistance, but they've managed to kind of galvanize their skill set and enhance it to such an extent where it minimizes the shortcoming of that punch resistance. I think a famous example of that is Vladimir Klitschko. Famously didn't have the best heart or the best punch resistance, but he managed to formulate a style with a very high IQ and very good technique, to the point where a lot of the time he could cancel out the offense of his opponent and kind of disguise those punch resistance issues. So Marcus Browne, I hope that he sticks around and goes through that journey of leveling up, because he is a talent, but it just wasn't enough today. Artur Beterbiev still has the power, still has the pressure and the conditioning and the toughness. The skills, they're there, but I just think there are some holes in his game. He's definitely underrated in the skill department, I think, by the majority of people, but there are still some holes there. Is he on the slide? Because how old is he now? 36. And now 17 fights in, there's not that much wear and tear, at least as a pro. I'm not sure how many fights he had as an amateur, but 36 in the world of boxing is no spring chicken. So, in a tough division like light heavyweight, on the top of my head, I can't really think of someone who has, who blows Beterbiev away. I think he's going to be one of those fighters who always has a tough fight, or always gives you a tough fight, regardless of whether he wins, loses, or draws. So, I'm not sure if I can make an assessment on how long Beterbiev has left. I definitely think he's reached his ceiling. I don't think he's going to get much better than this. I think from here it is going to be downwards. It just depends on how steep is that downward slope going to be. But I guess time will tell. It'd be interesting to see who he fights next. Bivol, Joe Smith Jr., maybe. I mean, those are the fights you'd hope for. But yeah, it's interesting to see. Light heavyweight's always an exciting division with monsters like this. But yeah, that is my assessment of this fight. Let me know what you think of this fight and my take of this fight in the comment section below. Do you agree, disagree, think I've missed anything out? Leave it all down below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.